I ultimately made the CEO who wronged me pay a stunning price, forced his company to unionize, and used his check to pay off my student loans and a very satisfying steak dinner. And it all started 25 years ago, when he tried to tear up a simple verbal agreement. Back then, I was just 18 years old. My life was a relentless cycle of work and study. During the day, I was at college, deep into computer science, or making a few extra bucks at computer repair jobs. But every single night, 7 nights a week, I was a driver. I was subcontracted to the local newspaper, tasked with delivering heavy bundles of print to stores and carriers across the region. I'd been brought into the fold by a family friend when I was just 16, starting as a spare driver, and eventually earned my own route, making me the youngest driver on the roster. It wasn't easy. I was working 7 nights a week while also juggling a full college course load. As one person later commented, "You probably don't want to get on the bad side of someone with that sort of drive." The route I was offered was a tough one, the most kilometers by far, but with a relatively low number of papers compared to the city routes. To make it profitable, my manager, Dave, and I came to a verbal agreement on a higher rate per kilometer to balance out the long hours and fuel costs. Based on that understanding, I went out and bought a heavy-duty cargo van that had been converted to run on propane, which was much cheaper back then. Honestly, most other trucks would have lost money on that route. For several months, everything was fine. Then I was summoned to the main office. The CEO of the distribution company, a man we'll call Mr. Sterling, was waiting for me. He was furious that I was being paid more for my kilometers than the in-city drivers. My manager, Dave, stood up for me, explaining that he had approved the rate to make the route viable, accounting for the longer hours and fewer deliveries. Mr. Sterling wasn't having it. In front of the entire office, he began yelling at Dave. "Is there a signed contract for these terms?" he boomed. When Dave admitted it was a verbal agreement, Sterling slammed his hand on the desk. "Then it doesn't count. It's void," he declared. As my late father used to say, "If you want a binding contract, get it in writing." It's a lesson I was learning the hard way. Mr. Sterling made a critical error at that moment, completely unaware that this single act of casual cruelty towards an 18-year-old kid would unravel his entire authoritarian grip on the company. I was stuck. I had a cargo van to pay off, and despite the politics, I genuinely enjoyed the solitude and responsibility of the job, so I kept working. But something inside me had changed. I started documenting everything, and I mean everything, every negotiation, every late-night call asking me to come in early, every request to change my route order. I logged my times waiting for the papers at the press, the exact minute I entered and left the loading bay, and even who was in the queue before and after me. I tracked my route completion times, my return home times, my fuel costs, every kilometer driven, and every press breakdown that caused a delay. 6 months of this 7-night-a-week grind passed, and I was exhausted. I asked for some time off, but my request was denied. None of the company's spare drivers would agree to cover my route. It simply cost them too much in time and gas for what the company was willing to pay them. I was trapped. Finally, at my breaking point, I threatened to quit. The company panicked and relented, agreeing to pay the spare drivers a higher rate to cover for me, a rate they still refused to give me. That was the final straw. I channeled my anger into research. I started reading about labor laws and discovered the magical difference between an independent contractor and a dependent contractor. It turned out that a dependent contractor, someone whose work is largely controlled by the company, is granted many of the same rights as a regular employee, including things like overtime and holiday pay. I knew this was ultimately a temporary job for me, but I was furious enough to make it my mission to ensure Mr. Sterling paid for his arrogance. Using the mountain of meticulous records I had gathered, I filed a comprehensive personal employment standards complaint. A key part of my case was demonstrating just how much control the company exerted over every aspect of how we performed our jobs. I didn't stop there. I offered my records to about 10 other drivers, who, inspired by my actions, followed my lead and filed their own complaints. Whispers of unionizing had always floated around the loading bay, but now, I joined the cause with a vengeance. We attracted the attention of one of the country's largest unions, which devoted significant resources to our cause even before they were officially voted in. My detailed records became their holy grail. They referred to them constantly. Because I had years of experience as a spare, I had intimate knowledge of nearly every route and the unfair pay discrepancies across the board. I used this knowledge to help convince other drivers, including some of the spares, to join the movement. This move revealed Mr. Sterling's greatest fatal flaw, his arrogance. He believed he could crush any dissent with force, never imagining that the very people he cast out would become the instruments of his downfall. The company fought back, and they played dirty. Several union-friendly spare drivers were fired. Routes were strategically amalgamated to push out other pro-union drivers. And then, I was let go. The official excuse was that I had less seniority than the CEO's own son-in-law, Rick, who had worked as a spare a handful of times over the years. But my departure didn't stick. The newspaper itself, our primary client, demanded my immediate return. My replacement, Rick, was a disaster. He was causing major delays and making bad drops, leading to a flood of complaints from carriers and customers. The union immediately filed complaints with the labor board, calling it what it was, blatant union busting. Meanwhile, my personal case was proceeding. Since the company had tried to use the seniority card against me, the Employment Standards Tribunal investigated. They determined that, having worked as a spare driver since I was 16, I actually had more seniority than a number of the company men. The labor board ruled that I should be given the chance to bump any of those drivers and take their more desirable routes. Suddenly, the company and the union were on the same side. They both asked me not to pursue this. In exchange for an immediate pay increase for my route and full back pay for the days I was illegally terminated, I happily agreed. 2 years after this whole saga began, negotiations were still ongoing, but we had achieved major victories. A universal pay algorithm was agreed upon, ensuring fair compensation for all drivers, and we all received back pay dating to the start of the negotiations. I received one of the largest checks. There was one thing, however, I refused to concede. I would not let the union negotiate away my personal employment standards complaint. I was the lone holdout. This unique position gave me equal standing in some of the labor board tribunals, placing me at the same table as the CEO and the top union negotiators. By refusing to back down, Leo transformed himself from a mere driver into a kingmaker at the negotiating table. His personal fight had now become the legal precedent that would empower the entire union. I will forever relish the memory of the absolute disdain Mr. Sterling had for me in those meetings. He would go so far as to place his large briefcase on the negotiating table just to block his view of me. In response, I would recline ever so slowly in those plush, comfy boardroom chairs, lock eyes with him over the top of his briefcase, and with a wide grin, offer him a glass of water. In the end, the Employment Standards Tribunal ruled entirely in my favor. They declared me a dependent contractor and awarded me everything I had asked for, plus penalties and interest. The tribunal made a special point to mention how egregiously the company had behaved throughout the process. This ruling was monumental, as the dependent contractor determination vastly strengthened the union's position for all future negotiations. Shortly after that victory, I quit. I had finished college and was ready to begin my career in the tech world, but Mr. Sterling couldn't let it go. It took another 2 years for the company to finally pay the full amount the tribunal had awarded me. The CEO delayed it for as long as he possibly could, sending me lowball settlement offers every few months, which I would promptly refuse. When that final check arrived, bearing his personal signature, it was more than enough to pay off all my student loans. And, of course, I used a little of it to treat myself to a very, very nice steak dinner. This story is a powerful reminder that integrity and determination are formidable weapons, and that detailed records can be the key that unlocks justice. Have you ever had a moment where keeping meticulous records saved you from a bad situation? Share your story in the comments below.